is what the bootleggers did.
But
And weren't active in selling beer. I did not know anything about that because, I was a young kid. How old are you?
12.
Yeah, your age, and that's when the prohibition was lifted, and you could buy liquor. So it's a pretty good memory for that age. And it was a kind of a good era because everything was dark and they could run in and out of Richfield with no problem at all. And they had pretty good things. All right, now what's your next question?
So what chores did you have to do?
What?
What chores did you have to do?
Chores?
Huh?
What chores did you and your brother have to do in the morning and the night?
At home.
Well, that's not liquor now, huh?
No, just questions.
No. Well, we had to feed chickens. We had apples, if they were ripe, we had to go out and pick them up. And we had to clean up the yard, take care of the yard. Then we had to play with our friends so that we wouldn't get in trouble. And we had to play with the dogs, so that was a good deal. That's about all we did during that early age until I was 11 years old.
I think somebody knows differently.
I've heard another story about a bucket that you sometimes...
About what?
A bucket you'd have to go get something.
Well,
Let's hear about that one.
in 1933, the Prohibition Act was overruled and they could make liquor, okay? What would happen is my uncle set up a tavern. And at that time you got beer, or you got cheese in a little bucket about this high, this big, with a handle. And my brother and I would go up to my uncle's tavern and get beer when he came back. And my dad would give me 10 cents, and we'd go up to the tavern, and my uncle would fill that pail with beer. Well, what happened is there was a lot of foam on the top. We didn't like that. So what we did is we put something that was greasy on the top, like lard, butter, and that would kill the foam. So we had more beer. And we would do this regularly. And they fill up the thing for 10 cents, and we were drunkards at the age of 11 and 7. So what else?
You drank that beer?
Huh?
You drank that beer?
Sure.
You didn't just bring it home?
Oh, we took it home and drank it.
Just
So our parents knew where we were.
how old were you when you were drinking this beer?
What?
How old were you when you were drinking this beer?
11 years.
And your brother?
7.
And was that near beer or regular beer?
Regular beer, not near beer, regular beer. When they removed the Prohibition Act, beer had about an 8% content of alcohol, or a little higher in that range. That is what it is today. So that's what they made after the Prohibition Act was canceled. So
Did you sometimes get some other beverage in that bucket or only beer?
I only had beer.
How about your brother?
He only had beer.
Didn't you go get milk? Then I heard there was milk from the homestead in the morning. that sometimes that same bucket was used to go get milk in the homestead.
Well, what happened is my father family had a farm in Richfield. They had cows and did milking, and so we would go up to the farm and stir up the milk so you didn't get all cream, because the cream came to the top, and put it in the bucket and go back home. That's how we got our beer, our milk. We didn't have a milkman. We had a little bucket that we filled with milk and came back home. And if we were really lucky, we'd sneak up and we would find where there was cream on top, and we'd take that home, and then we could make ice cream out of that.
Excellent.
So, any other questions? Come on.
Okay, yeah. How did Prohibition affect your family directly?
I don't know really, basically how it affected the family, but I do know that the local taverns and tavern keepers all had whiskey, and it didn't. And my father was the only one who would drink it, and he'd go up in the tavern, buy a beer, and when it was half empty, he'd put a shot in it, and he'd drink that. And it was beer. So that happened so that the revenue agents couldn't catch anybody. Okay,
Alright.
next. Am I doing all right?
You're doing great.
I want to, while they're at one point, will you describe Richfield and who lives there and how it is?
What?
How did Richfield come to be, and who were your neighbors? Were they mostly strangers, farmers, family?
Oh, Richfield?
Yeah.
Well, Richfield had, now that's off of Bootlegging.
Yes, we know.
Richfield had, what I know about it, had a farm, had 7 taverns, it had a post office, a store, a butcher shop, a hardware store, and I don't know if it had any area where there was anything produced like a manufactured property, manufactured item. I don't really know or remember where there was anything like that produced. So it was just a matter of living, and the people there, I mean, give me a minute and I'll tell you. Farming was a big thing. Many people worked on the farm. Some of them worked in small towns. The tinsmith had 2 people working for him. There was a blacksmith, and there was a harness maker. That was about the end of it.
Did you say you had a bank?
Yeah, there was a bank.
Okay.
In a church?
In a church?
Well, there's a Methodist church in the area, in town. It was a small church. And there was a bank in town. And there were some people who were carpenters who did carpenter work, tin work, and that was about it.
Can you just, I don't know, can you just tell the story about the time the bank robbers came through?
What?
Can you tell the story about when the bank robbers came through?
Yeah. You don't want to hear that.
Don't you? Sure.
I was a young kid. I don't remember how old I was. But a bunch of us, little group, maybe 3 or 4, we had set up a deal where we could go into a woods that was 40 acres. We go into one angle of it, and we go all the way through the woods and never touch the ground. We swing from branches to branches to branches. And we were going there one day, and there was a car parked ahead of us. And we were trying to figure out the license number of the car. Well, we couldn't find it. We couldn't read it. It was too far away, so we went in the woods. And it wasn't very long, and the bank alarm went off. There was a robbery. The banker was shot. They shot the banker and took the money and got out of town. And they were eventually caught. So the Milwaukee Journal put out a paper covering the robbery in less than it happened at 9 o'clock in the morning. You robbed the bank, and at 12 o'clock they had a newspaper on the street in Richfield reporting the robbery. So they finally caught the robbers, and they brought them back to Richfield, and they interrogated them there, and the robbers were kept in jail. It took them 4 years to find them and get them. Any other?
So what did you think about the prohibition? So
What?
what did you think about prohibition? Did you agree with like what the bootleggers were doing? Did you disagree with the entire idea of like you had the near beer and then you added the shot?
Well, prohibition caused a criminal element to come into the areas. The criminals, the dealers in the whiskey and booze were profiting off of having a liquor content that had a alcohol content of more than 3.8. So as a result, this became a rather interesting situation. Now, if you got into Milwaukee, there you had a lot of agents, alcohol agents, and there they would try to sell it. Out in the country they didn't, because there wasn't that much going on, and because the people had accepted the area, and the people were protecting the bootleggers, not protecting them per se, but not disclosing what the bootleggers were doing. So the cops had a hard time doing anything in small towns. Now this is Richfield, and my experience is there. Now there were other towns all up and down the highway